This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Now, Sports Bash Saturday. Here's Josh Hennig.
Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you here on a Saturday afternoon. Hope everyone's having a great weekend out there. Of course, text board is open at 609-403-0973. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at 973 ESPN. We got a lot of topics to get to this hour. Don't forget Sixers coming up at 3 p.m. here on 97.3 ESPN. I'll be talking with the UFC Welterweight champion of the world, Kamaru Usman, coming up at 1:20 p.m. this afternoon. We will give you my UFC picks for UFC 258. Of course, all my picks later in the show, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Use the promo code Hennig when you sign up for same-game parlay insurance and a risk-free bet up to $1,000. FanDuel Sportsbook promo code Hennig when you sign up. Also, we'll get into the Eagles and the latest with the NFL as well here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. I think at this point in time, there's no new news when it comes to Carson Wentz. There's really no further information aside from what came out in the last couple of days, which is there's one report that says that there were 2 first-round picks and a third or fourth that was the best offer for Carson Wentz and the Eagles. There's another report out there that says that an NFL team says that was not the best offer and that their team offered the best offer that was better than that offer. Whatever the offer is, I think we all can agree that Carson Wentz is getting traded at some point. The bigger question is, then what? Then what happens to the Eagles if you move on from Carson Wentz? To me, that's what really the next stage of this conversation is. And I think we can have that conversation today because, let's be realistic. If we're going to go forward with the idea that Carson Wentz is not going to be in Philadelphia anymore, then the reality is that who is going to be the quarterback next year? I know we all assume it's Jalen Hurts, but does it have to be Jalen Hurts? See, that's the part of the question that I want to have answered here. Listen, I think Jalen Hurts could be an NFL quarterback. I really do. But is he really the best option moving forward? I'm inclined to say yes. My instinct is to say yes. But you do have the 6th overall pick. Theoretically, you could acquire a quarterback via trade or free agency. You could have a competition going into camp next year. Just because we assume that Jalen Hurts is the starting quarterback doesn't mean he is the starting quarterback. Those are 2 different things. Now, I'm not going to act like I'm in love with any of the quarterbacks in the draft whose names are not Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. And I think both of those guys will be picked and gone before the Eagles ever have a chance to get anybody else. Whether it's because, as Todd McShay's projecting, there's going to be 4 quarterbacks in the first 4 picks, or a team trades up ahead of the Eagles and grabs Fields. Because as we go through this process, I promise you this. Every team evaluating quarterbacks wants Trevor Lawrence. And now that they know they can't get Trevor Lawrence from the Jags, everyone else is going to want Wilson or Fields. And if I'm the Eagles, I have zero interest in Trey Lance. And it's not just because it's from North Dakota State. And I have zero interest in Mac Jones. And it's not because he's from Alabama. You don't need a rookie quarterback right now. You have a young quarterback to develop. There's no reason for the Eagles to go out there and acquire another quarterback. Think about it this way. You just bought a car. Why do you need a newer car? Literally, the car is brand new. You got it. You leased it. You got low payments, great insurance payments. Why do you need another car? Why do you need more drama in paradise? The Eagles don't need more drama. They need stability. The Eagles need stability moving forward. So No more quarterback controversy. Keep the head coach longer than a few years. Let this team get from where they are now, which is a team that is still licking their wounds from a season with a plethora of injuries and a quarterback controversy, firing a Super Bowl winning head coach. Let's have some stability. And I'm taking the position right here, right now, that you don't draft a quarterback. You don't go out and sign a quarterback to bring in for competition. Yes, you go out and sign a veteran who could be a backup and mentor Hurts and help him out a little bit. But Hurts is your guy. You drafted him in the second round. Howie Roseman said himself that the Eagles could not pass up Jalen Hurts. If you believe that about this young man, then when you trade Carson Wentz, that's got to be your quarterback. End of story, period. No questions asked. Now, what do you do with him after this year? Well, that's a different conversation. But for right now, right here in this moment, Jalen Hurts is your guy. Okay? Jalen Hurts is the guy. Now, for the veteran, I talked with Dave Weinberg earlier this week on game night on 97.3 ESPN, 6, 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. And Dave Weinberg thinks they should bring back Nick Foles to be the backup quarterback. I can rock with it. I think it's a good point that he makes, that Foles understands the city better than anybody else, that Foles understands what it takes to be a quarterback in Philadelphia. But I'm also intrigued by another free agent out there, Ryan Fitzpatrick. The word out there is that the Dolphins are not bringing Fitzmagic back. I think that Fitzpatrick is arguably the best backup quarterback in the NFL. There is nobody better to come in for a quarterback. There's no one better to deal with a young player who is still finding their feet. There is nobody better, in my opinion, that understands the league and is a relatable guy. He's not someone who is uptight. He's not someone who's aloof. He's just a good locker room guy. So, to me, the focus of the Eagles, as soon as they trade Wentz, is who's the backup quarterback to support Jalen Hurts. You got to support this young man. You got to put him in the best position to be successful. The Eagles got to make sure that Hurts is in a position to be successful. And part of that is making sure you have the right backup quarterback behind him. I don't want a quarterback competition with Wentz gone. I want Hurts to be the guy. I want this team to make sure that everyone's healthy on the offensive line. Maybe you bring in another veteran receiver. Maybe you do a couple things on the offense to kind of shore up the tools and the weapons around him. But Hurts has got to be the guy moving forward. What do you think? 609-403-0973 is the text board to get on the conversation. 609-403-0973. We also live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. As you watch the show, you can comment on the stream as we go along with the show. 609-403-0973 is the text board, at 973 ESPN on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter to watch the show. So now on top of all of that, in my opinion, Hurts is the quarterback. You bring in a veteran, whether it's Foles, Fitzmagic, whoever. The next step is, how do we make sure that we are not in cap hell, cap purgatory, whatever you want to call it? The reports are out there that Wentz is getting traded. Now, how that impacts your cap is going to have a big part of this situation. And again, the report is out there. Ron Jaworski reported that the Colts have offered 2 second-round picks for Wentz. There are other reports out there that the market has cooled on Carson Wentz over the last week, and that the Bears are losing interest. And there are reports that there are speculation out there that the Eagles have to come off of their initial asking price, which, again, according to different people out there, is they want a Matthew Stafford type of return for Wentz, which they're not going to get. They were never going to get, because half the reason why the Lions got 2 first-round picks and Jared Goff was because they were basically paying the Lions to take Jared Goff off their hands. I don't think it's completely unreasonable that you could get a first-round pick for Wentz, but I had this conversation with Hunter Brody yesterday on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. I think when you look around the quarterback market out there, Matt Ryan's probably getting traded. Sam Darnold is likely to get traded. Deshaun Watson is going to be traded probably at some point. The expectation that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be traded. Add on top of that, you're going to see 5 rookie quarterbacks drafted. You could potentially have 10 plus new quarterbacks starting in the NFL in new locations next year. I at least expect Trevor Lawrence to be starting in Jacksonville. I expect that whoever drafts Justin Fields and Zach Wilson to consider starting them day one. I at least assume that the 49ers' lack of commitment to Jimmy Garoppolo means they're probably going to move on from him. I'm assuming that Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford are going to start for their team. So you're going to have a lot of new quarterbacks around the NFL. And with all of this movement, the Eagles are gauging the market. And if they're serious about trading Wentz, they are going to have to take what they can get. I don't think that you're going to get as good of a return as Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is arguably one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL. So you're not getting that return that you would get for Watson. Then you look over at a guy, for example, like Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's a league MVP. He took a team to the Super Bowl. Yeah, he's a little older, but he's still got something in the tank. He's thrown for 4,000 yards, 10 straight years? I think he gets a better return on investment in a trade than Carson Wentz. So then it comes down to Sam Darnold. If you are a team that maybe is not really high on Trey Lance, Mac Jones, and the other young quarterbacks, Sam Darnold's probably the guy that you're targeting if you don't want Wentz. Because at this point, Wentz, he's no longer a young player, but he's still young enough to be developed and salvaged and turned into a starter. Darnold is younger than Wentz. He's less expensive than Wentz. Realistically, the only teams that can take on Wentz are teams that can absorb at least some of his contract. That's why the Colts are being discussed. That's why the Broncos are being discussed out there by different reports. Like, you need a team that can take on the contract of Wentz. That's the key to trading him. Because if you're the Eagles, you're trying to unload as much of that money as possible. So if you're trying to unload as much money as possible, then if you're the Eagles, you got to make sure that the team you're trading him to can take that hit, or is willing to take the hit, or willing to work with you in moving the money along or moving the money around. Remember, when Nick Foles got traded from the Jags to the Bears, he renegotiated his contract to make it work. But if your team's around the NFL, Sam Darnold, you don't have to do that with. You don't have to renegotiate his deal. He's still on his rookie deal. If you're a team that's having to make a decision between Darnold and Wentz, I don't think it's an easy decision. I think it's a very difficult decision because both quarterbacks have questions. Both quarterbacks, I don't think we're 100% sure what they are. When I look at Darnold, I do see some of Wentz. When I see Wentz, I do see some of Darnold. I see 2 young men who have potential, who have talent, but their talent is not being accentuated right now. So if your talent's not being accentuated, then you have to go somewhere that's going to unlock that talent. And there are some teams that may look at Darnold and say, I'd rather take a risk on that guy than absorb Wentz's contract or Wentz's money long term. You know, one of the reasons why the Eagles want to trade him as soon as possible is because they want to get that roster bonus off of their books. They don't want to have to pay that roster bonus. So some teams have to pay that for you if you trade him. You don't have that problem with Darnold. And if you're the Bears, if the Bears are, as reports say, are losing interest, then guess what? Maybe Darnold is our target. Or maybe they, try to get into the Matt Ryan sweepstakes. I think no matter what, the Bears are acquiring a quarterback this offseason because the Mitch Trubisky era is done and Ryan Pace needs to save his job. Here's a list of the teams real quick that need quarterbacks this offseason. The Chicago Bears, the Indianapolis Colts, the Washington football team. If San Francisco trades Jimmy G, they are an opening. Atlanta, quarterback questions. Cowboys, they're not really making a trade, but the Dak Prescott situation is looming over their heads. They have a situation at quarterback moving forward. Do they just lock up Dak on a franchise tag, or do they actually give him a legitimate contract? Those are two different situations. Houston, if they trade Deshaun Watson, who's their quarterback moving forward? Carolina, are they 100% committed to Teddy Bridgewater long-term, or is he a bridge quarterback and they'll draft a quarterback? There's a lot of rumors out there that the Panthers love Mac Jones, that the Panthers are considering trading up to draft a quarterback with the Dolphins potentially, who have the third overall pick. The New England Patriots, they need a quarterback. The Cam Newton experiment didn't work out. And don't tell me Jarrett Stidham is the quarterback of the future. Anyone with a half a brain who can watch football knows that Jarrett Stidham is not the quarterback of the future in New England. Denver Broncos, questions about Drew Lock. Is he really the future at quarterback? Nobody really knows. And with John Elway moving from GM up the ladder and them hiring a new general manager in Denver, and John Elway becoming now the football operations president only, there's speculation that Elway, part of him making that move, is to remove himself from the quarterback situation. So if Elway's moving himself from the quarterback situation, then does the new GM say, well, I didn't draft Lock. I don't need a Lock. I'm going to go out and get my own guy. So there's a lot of moving parts here around the NFL. And the question is, who's going where? The initial report was that Carson Wentz had 5 teams interested. If the Bears are losing interest, then now you're down to 4 teams. We know for sure that Colts are one of those teams. There's a lot of speculation out there that the Broncos are another one of those teams. Would the Patriots call the Eagles and make a deal? It's possible. Would there be a scenario where Carson Wentz could be involved in a 3 or 4-way deal with multiple players moving so everyone gets the assets they want? The reason I say that is because I genuinely think that Kyle Shanahan is done with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think the Jimmy Garoppolo thing has hit its expiration date in San Francisco. I think that it's obvious that Shanahan is not enthralled with the quarterback anymore. So I can see Shanahan going to his GM, John Lynch, and saying, go get me one of my old quarterbacks. Matt Ryan in Atlanta, Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. 2 quarterbacks who have worked with Shanahan and both had phenomenal years under his coaching. And where Wentz falls into this is, if it is Minnesota, I can see the Vikings calling Howie Roseman and trying to work out a deal to get Wentz, because I don't think that the Vikings want Jimmy G. You know who does want Jimmy G? Bill Belichick. That was the guy that Belichick wanted to be the heir apparent to Tom Brady, but he was forced to trade him away. So a lot of scenarios. We'll touch on them all coming up next here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. The text board is open at 609-403-0973. Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, we're streaming live at 973 ESPN with all your thoughts coming up next right here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. I'm Josh Hennig. You can find me on Twitter at Josh Hennig. We've got more coming up next here on 97.3 ESPN.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. The text board is open at 609-403-0973. You can also watch the show on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and comment down below on the stream. 97.3 ESPN. Talking about the Eagles quarterback situation. We'll also get to the Sixers a little bit later. Sixers playing the Suns at 3 o'clock today on 97.3 ESPN. Also, my conversation with UFC Welterweight champion Kamaru Usman coming up at 1:20 p.m. today. But, of course, we are talking the Eagles right now, 609-403-0973. We'll do your comments on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as well in just a moment. Let's first start with Brian in Absecon. Brian Absekin says, I don't think Howie ever truly expected to get 2 first-round picks, but 2 seconds doesn't exactly pique my interest. Better off waiting than rushing into it. That's Brian and Absekin. You know, Brian, I asked this question to Adam Kaplan on Football at 4 yesterday, Adam Kaplan, Eagles NFL insider, about the fact that, you know, there seems to be 2 camps right now of Eagle fans. There's the camp of Eagle fans, Brian, that say, well, I don't want to make a bad deal. I want to wait for the best deal. And there's another camp that says, you got to trade him now. You got to get rid of him now, or you're going to lose people's interest. And I see both sides of the argument. To me, I feel like Howie Roseman has made enough trades that he understands the market better than anyone. And I agree with you. I don't think Howie ever really expected to get 2 first-round picks, but I do think Howie wants to get at least 1 first-round pick. I think that's kind of where the rub is right now. I think the rub is that Howie doesn't want to just give Wentz away. I think Howie wants to turn around and say, I'm trying to get real value for this quarterback. So the 2 second-round picks is not exactly exciting, and I get that. And I understand your perspective, Brian. But I was telling this to Hunter Birdie yesterday. Not all second-round picks are the same. If you can get a second-round pick that's in the top 10 picks of the second round, you're still getting a first-round caliber talent in the second round. Guys like T. Higgins and Michael Pittman and DeAndre Swift were all taken in the top 10 picks of the second round. In fact, the only really bad second-round pick from this last year's draft was drafted by the Patriots. So read into that what you will. So to me, if I'm getting a second-round pick that's in that top 10 range, that's a huge difference. You know, the 35th pick in the draft, to me, is different than the 45th pick. So I need to know what those 2 second-round picks are before I sit there and poo-poo it. But that's just my opinion. That's from Brian Absekin. Text that in 609-403-0970. Also, you can comment on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as you watch the show. Another text that came in on the text board, Dan from EHC says, it seems simple to me. No team wants Wentz's contract. Teams are clearly better off going in another direction. Renegotiate the contract is what will have to happen. Well, Dan from EHC, first of all, I think they should renegotiate the deal no matter what. I think the Eagles need to force Wentz to talk to them, or at least force his agent to talk to them and say, listen, your client doesn't want to be here. We'll get your client out of here, but you got to give us a little wiggle room with this contract. You got to, and I think that they will. I can't believe in any reality or in any scenario that Wentz and his agent are unwilling to work with the Eagles to get him out of Philadelphia. If Wentz seriously doesn't want to be here, I don't see a scenario where they don't renegotiate the deal. So they got to do something. They got to renegotiate the deal somehow. I think that's going to happen no matter what. I think the problem right now, Dan and EHT, is the reason why interest is waning and teams are looking in a different direction is because I think teams want to know what the market is for the other quarterbacks. I mentioned Sam Darnold, Matt Ryan, Deshaun Watson, Jimmy Garoppolo, Mitch Trubisky's a free agent, Ryan Fitzpatrick's a free agent. You're going to get 5 quarterbacks in the first round of the draft. Teams are evaluating their options and if Wentz is really the best option for them. Remember, just because the Eagles are willing to trade him doesn't mean everybody wants to trade for him in the first place. So the interest and the return on the trade is not the only thing that has to be factored in here. And don't forget, Wentz's contract, because of the way it's structured and because of the way a renegotiation may have to happen, may be part of the reason why you're only getting offered 2 second-round picks from potentially a team like the Colts. And here's why I say that. Go back a few years ago. Go back in the time machine here. Brock Osweiler was traded with a second-round pick to the Cleveland Browns in a salary dump. The Houston Texans were trying to get rid of the guy. They made a mistake. They were trying to get their way out of it. They were trying to find a way to eat some money and get out from under the Osweiler contract long term. The conversation with the Colts, reason why it might be 2 second-round picks, maybe the Colts turn to the Eagles and say, look, we will work with you in absorbing more money on Wentz's contract than other teams are willing to do. And if the Eagles go to the Colts and say, well, what can you give us? The reason why the Colts are saying, well, we'll give you 2 second-round picks is because maybe the Colts are saying, we won't give you a first-round pick because we're absorbing so much of the money. So that may have something to do with it. They're going to renegotiate the contract some way no matter what, because I just don't see a way the Eagles are just going to take a $50 million cap hit and just say, have a nice life, Wentz. I think they're going to find a way to bring that down just like the Jaguars did, or Jaguars or Jackson, whatever you want to call them. The team that Urban Meyer coaches now that was previously coached by Doug Marrone with Tom Coughlin in the front office and Dave Caldwell. They got Foles' contract renegotiated so it wouldn't be a huge salary cap hit. So when the Jags traded him to the Bears, they didn't get burdened down with the leftovers of Foles' contract. And I don't see why the Eagles can't do the same. 609-403-0973 is the text board, 609-403-0973. Also, you can comment on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, as well as you watch the show at 973 ESPN. I got to get to this comment from John in Tuckerton. Now, I preface this by saying, in no way do I endorse what John in Tuckerton is saying, and I'll explain why when I read the full text. John in Tuckerton says, the Eagles should trade Wentz to Chicago for Foles, 2 second-round picks, and a 4th-round pick. Then trade Hurts to Houston with our 1st-round pick, the 2 seconds and the 4th from Chicago. That way we get Watson and Foles as the backup. Well, first of all, John, that sounds great in a world where everybody cooperates with you and everybody does what you want. Okay? I don't see Chicago allowing you to get Deshaun Watson. The reports are out of Chicago that Ryan Pace wants to get Deshaun Watson, that he realizes the error of his ways in drafting Trubisky, and he wants to make up for that, and he's willing to sell the farm to get Watson. The problem is, when teams are calling the Texans are hanging up on them. They're saying, nah, we're not trading Watson. For some reason, and I don't know why, Cal McNair, the owner of the Texans, Nick Caserio, the new GM, and the shadow master, the shadow puppet master, Jack Easterby in Houston, they don't want to trade Watson. They refuse to trade him even though he doesn't want to be there. They're willing to let J.J. Watt walk to go to another team, but they don't want to move on and let Watson leave. So it's a great theory, John Tuckerton, but it doesn't exist in reality. Because in reality, there's no way Chicago is letting you develop a large enough draft pick package to get Watson when they would just go get Watson themselves. Listen, Ryan Pace is a guy who will mortgage the farm, and we've seen him do it before. He did it to get Khalil Mack. He gave up a lot to get Mack. We saw him move up 1 pick to get Mitch Trubisky. There's no way that Chicago is going to be a part of a situation for the Eagles to get the guy that they want. And with Houston not answering anybody's phone calls right now, I'm supposed to believe that Houston is going to make a trade at all. I appreciate the effort, John Tuckerton, but that's just not going to happen. Again, the text board is open, 609-403-0973. Billy Schwein from the locker room, even though he already finished his show, as a comment on the Facebook stream. Billy Schwein says, the Eagles would never get a number 1 pick for Wentz because other teams know how dysfunctional their relationship is. Well, first of all, Billy, the Eagles' relationship with Wentz has no bearing on a team trading for him. Because if a team thinks they can fix Wentz or they can get the most out of Wentz, his relationship with the Eagles has nothing to do with the conversation. At all. Nada. Zilch. Nobody cares about the relationship with the Eagles between them and Wentz. See, the problem is in this situation, and John for Tuckerton did something similar here, you are projecting your perspective on the situation onto other people. You're assuming that everybody is looking at things the same way you are. Everybody is falling in line with how you're viewing things. I highly doubt that Chris Ballard, the GM in Chicago, or Ryan Pace, the GM in Ryan Pace, GM in Chicago, Chris Ballard in Indianapolis, John Elway in Denver, John Lynch in San Francisco, Bill Belichick in New England. I don't think any of these guys really care about Wentz's relationship with the Eagles. I think they care about what is the amount I have to trade away to get a quarterback, what are the Eagles willing to accept in a trade, and what is the status of Wentz's contract, what is the status of Wentz moving forward. That's what they're worried about. They don't care about Wentz's relationship with the Eagles because everybody assumes I can fix the guy. I can do it better. I know better. I'm smarter than the Eagles. I'm smarter than the coaches. I can make this work. I can get the most out of this guy. In order for you to be an NFL head coach, you got to have a certain level of gravitas, a certain level of chutzpah to believe that you know better than somebody else. And in this case, part of the reason why teams are willing to trade for Wentz is because they believe that they can do better than the Eagles. That's a huge, huge part of this. We'll get to more of your comments coming up at 609-403-0973. Also, if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you can comment on the stream about the Eagles quarterback situation. Hurts' future. Should he be the starting quarterback? Eagles trading away Wentz. Do you accept 2 second-round picks? Should they hold out for more? Josh Hennig here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. Don't forget, Sixers basketball coming up at 3 o'clock today on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers versus Suns. The next game of the Sixers road trip. They're already 1-1 on this current road trip. Can they go to 2-1? Find out with Tom McGinnis on the call coming up at 3 p.m. on 97.3 ESPN FM. Also following that will be Villanova versus Creighton in college basketball. It's a triple header of basketball action tonight because at 8 p.m. today, coverage of Nets versus Warriors right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Also, want to remind you, coming up at 1:20 p.m. today, I'll be chatting with UFC welterweight champion of the world, Kamaru Usman, about his fight tonight as he defends his title against Gilbert Burns at UFC 258. A lot to go here on 97.3 ESPN. And, of course, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can watch the show on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. Just follow 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. Yes, live in the Matt Blatt Kia Studios at Matt Blatt Kia, located in the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. They want to get you approved today. That's Matt Blatt Kia. Also online at mattblattkia.com. We'll get back to your comments and texts and everything. 609-403-0973. Also, watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Thank you for watching the show today on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter at 973 ESPN, where you can comment as well. Before we get to the messages on the stream, we'll get a couple texts in here at 609-403-0973. Someone followed up on John Tuckerton's text. Says either John's trade was accepted or Watson even want to play in Philadelphia. He has a no trade clause, so he has 100% say where he's traded. That is 100% correct, Texter. That's another element of this. Watson, unlike Wentz, has a no trade clause. Wentz doesn't have a no trade clause. Wentz can be traded, and he has to accept it. The Eagles could trade him to Alaska, even though he might not like that because it's isolated away from the Philly media. But Watson may not want to be here. You know, Watson's an interesting guy because for those who don't know his background, you know, before he got to Clemson, he was not as highly recruited as some of the other top quarterback prospects. He could have gone to other schools. He took the Clemson thing because they sold him on the idea of him, you know, starting and playing for a national championship, which they had not won yet at that point. Watson was the start of the Clemson dynasty as we know it today over in college football. So when you think about the situation with Watson, he comes from humble beginnings. He grew up with a single mom. He didn't have money. He didn't have a lot of opportunities in life. He earned everything he got. So, you know, for someone like him, he may look at certain teams in certain cities and just say, I don't want to play there. I don't want to be there. I have no interest in going there. And you could argue that Deshaun Watson is pulling an NBA power play in terms of players saying, get me out of here, but I'm going to pick and choose where I want to go. So the texter is right. Even if all things were equal, maybe Deshaun Watson will be in Philadelphia. There's a lot of talk that Deshaun Watson wants to go to Miami, or he wants to go somewhere in the South, maybe even Atlanta, for example, and play there. That he doesn't want to go to the Northeast. So read into that what you will. Watching on YouTube at 973 ESPN, Connor Spencer says, I can still see a scenario Wentz is still here another year. Here's the thing, Connor. I'm leaning toward the no on that because I think that this situation, the cat's out of the bag, toothpaste out of the toothpaste tube, whatever scenario you want to call it. The fire's already out of control. It's already a forest fire. Whatever analogy you want to use, I don't see a scenario where the Eagles can just, put a Band-Aid on this situation and say, we'll go through one more year. It's not a big deal. Everything said in the media, everything reported, everything that happened this year, we're just going to forget about it. Let's move on. I just don't know if you can do that in reality. When I look at the Philadelphia Eagles, I see a franchise that imploded this past year. I see an owner that was very unhappy with the situation, and he didn't like the answers he got from his head coach about how to fix the problem moving forward. I think the owner looks at the situation in Philadelphia and says, I want something different. And he himself described Carson Wentz as an asset. That's telling to me. I don't know about the rest of you. You could tell me at 609-403-0973, or you can comment on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter while you watch the show. For me, when the owner says the quarterback is an asset, he didn't call him the franchise quarterback. He didn't say he is our starting quarterback. He called him an asset. He then went on to say how talented Wentz is and how phenomenal his potential is and all this stuff. It's almost like he was starting to sell him. So if that's what the owner thinks of the situation, and to me, the owner is the end-all, be-all. I don't think a lot of you out there blame the owner enough for what's going on. Remember, if you don't like Howie Roseman, blame the owner. The owner is the one who said 10 years ago, after Andy Reid had a bad draft, let's go with Howie's board. The owner is the one who told Howie, go out and go get Chip Kelly. And he was the one who was able to get Chip Kelly. The owner is the one that brought Howie back from the broom closet after Chip Kelly was fired. The owner is the one who fired Doug Peterson and kept Howie Roseman, and had Howie Roseman and him go out and find a new head coach. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Thanks to Connor for chiming in on the YouTube feed. Dan EHC follows up and says, is it possible that Wentz's value has dropped so much that he can't be dealt? I'm not so sure that teams believe he can be fixed. Wentz's resume is below average outside 2017. So a little background for folks out there before I answer Dan's question. Dan and EHC and I have had a friendly debate for the last, Dan, I want to say, 2 years now, about Wentz and his potential and what he can and can't do. Dan has always taken the position that Wentz is a turnover-prone machine, which I don't agree with, and he points to fumbles a lot, which my answer has always been that Deshaun Watson fumbles the ball too, but nobody calls him a turnover-prone machine. But anyway, so Dan's coming from this position that Wentz is maybe a lesser quarterback than other people believe he is. That's part of the reason why he's asking the question. Listen, Dan, I have to respectfully disagree with you because, number one, like the other texters, and like I was saying to Billy Schweim earlier when he messaged the show on the stream, you can't project your own opinion about a player in a situation onto everyone else. You got to remove your own opinion and your own beliefs and your own theories from the situation and view it from other people's perspective. As I said earlier, you don't become an NFL head coach or an NFL GM if you don't have a certain level of chutzpah, gravitas, stones, whatever phrase you want to use, a certain level of ego to say, I know better than fill in the blank. I know more than somebody else. I'm smarter than somebody else. So there's always going to be someone out there who thinks they can fix somebody. Jerry Jones thinks he can rehab every malcontent in the NFL, right? John Gruden thinks he can make any quarterback work. He showed that in Tampa. He brought in Marcus Mariota last year to back up Derek Carr. There are coaches and GMs and executives who think that they know better than somebody. And I guarantee you there's someone out there who thinks Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie and Doug Peterson are idiots, and that they know better and they can make Wentz work. So keep that in mind with this conversation. Now, Wentz's value, yes, that is something that I think is a little bit more in the conversation. As I said earlier, if you compare Wentz to Matt Ryan, you compare him to Sam Darnold, you compare him to Jimmy Garoppolo, Deshaun Watson, Mitch Trubisky, Ryan Fitzpatrick, the 5 rookies in the draft. Where does he fall on that list? To me, that's where the value is. It's not as much about Wentz's resume, because Wentz's resume is subjective. You mentioned 2017, but there's a lot of people who study a lot of film, who know more football than you and I do, who look at that run in 2019 in that December when they won those games and he carried the team. They view that as a huge positive in Wentz's resume. So while you and I can critique it and rip it and say all kinds of things about it, there are people who are football gurus who think that's a big deal. We'll get into more of this coming on next. Josh Hennig, Sports Bash Saturday, 97.3 ESPN, and live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. UFC Welterweight Championship belt is on the line, and the champ himself is on the line. The one and only Kamaru Usman joins us on the Boardwalk on the hotline. Kamaru, how you doing today?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to this fight. I mean, you were supposed to fight Gilbert Burns a couple times already, and now you're finally going to be able to get into that cage and fight with him. What has it been like for you preparing for this fight that was supposed to happen a couple times, and now it's finally going to happen?
It's been a long and rigorous process, but I think obviously having more time now to be able to prepare to fully be ready going into the fight, I think it's only going to be to my benefit. And initially, it's a tough one to kind of swallow, fighting someone that you've known quite a bit, you've felt, you've trained with. But it is what it is. At the end of the day, this is our job, and I have to be able to go in there, put all those feelings aside, and take care of business.
What's the biggest, you feel, advantage going into a fight, knowing someone as well as you know Gilbert Burns? Because I think a lot of people, they would say, I don't know if I would ever fight a teammate. I don't know if I would ever, compete with somebody who knows me as well. But you seem to not be bothered by that at all. You seem to be very focused for this fight.
Yeah, at the end of the day, he even put it out. He said it. He said that I have something, he wants it, and he's coming to take it. And that's not something that I took very lightly. There's a reason I'm the champion, and I have to go in there and show him this is the reason I'm the champion, and you're not the champion. And so it's one of those things that you come for what I have, and I have to be able to defend it. So, he's a tough guy. I know he's tough, and he's going to come with his A game. And if he really did his homework, then he's going to bring out a different savage out of me that he's never seen before.
The champ is on the line. Kamaru Usman, UFC 258 Saturday night on pay-per-view. ESPN Plus is where you can watch it. Kamaru, one of the things that's interesting about your situation is you were never handed anything. You had to work for everything you were given. You wrestled at Division II in the NCAA. You were the Ultimate Fighting Champion. You're someone who's worked hard to get where you are. Do you ever take a moment to look back and just appreciate how far you've come and what you're going to be doing in your future?
Yeah, I mean, that just goes to show just kind of my life and my journey and how I approach certain things. You can even take it a step back. I started wrestling in high school my sophomore year. There were kids that have been wrestling, since they were 3-4 years old. And I had to close that gap on all these guys. And a lot of people would say, oh, yeah, that's that's an obstacle a lot of people can't get over, but I didn't care about that. I was going to get over that. I was going to do whatever it took in order to be successful in it. And that just goes to show my resilience when it comes to this game. It's not me just playing a sport just to play a sport. I don't come here just to compete. I come here to win. And that's one thing that I've been doing very well, and I'm going to continue to do until I call it quits.
Well, winning is what you've been doing a lot for sure, because 3 of your last 4 wins have been against former UFC champions. You're building an amazing resume. Is that something you have a goal of? Is one of your goals maybe to be one of the best of the best all time? Not just at welterweight, but if you keep going the trajectory you're going, you could be one of the best of any weight class.
Yeah, I mean that's when I'm said and done, that's what that's what I want bestowed upon me. I want that to be put on me as a guy that not only do you fight everybody, but you beat everybody. And so that's not something that right now that I put on myself. I try not to put that pressure on myself. I just want to go in there and take it one fight at a time. And when I'm done, everyone's going to look back on my body of work and say, wow, he was really, truly the greatest.
UFC welterweight champion Kamaru Usman joining us on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. UFC 258 Saturday night on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. Kamaru, I want to ask you a question that's been asked me a lot, and that is, I know that you're a great human being. Matt Serra has told me before, you're one of the nicest people he's ever met in his life. But for a lot of people who don't understand MMA as well as someone who may be the diehard, how do you go from explain to the audience, how you go from being this wonderful, great guy outside the cage to being this dominant monster that you are when the fight starts?
It's being able to, I think for years, especially being a wrestler, I've learned and I've honed how to craft all of that, how to just hone all of that and put it together. And that's what I do very well. And I know how to turn it on and turn it off. I can turn it on and turn it off. And as soon as I cross that threshold of walking into that cage, I turn on the Nigerian Nightmare. And when I walk out of there, I have to put back on Kamaru Usman because I have a child at home. And I can't be the Nigerian Nightmare to that sweet little girl, So it's being able to learn how to turn it on and off. And I think that's part of what makes me who I am.
You mentioned your nickname, the Nigerian Nightmare. For those who are in my age group, we know that was Christian Okoye's nickname when he played in the NFL. I know that Christian Okoye gave you his blessing for that nickname. Tell the story about that real quick.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nickname that it's every exceptional Nigerian in any field of their sports to be excellent, to basically just exemplify excellence. And Christian Okoye did it. Samuel Peters did it, WBC heavyweight boxing champion of the world. And now a numerous amount of soccer players, football players have done it. So now it's my turn to carry on the torch of that name in the combat world.
Kamaru, you're 33 years old, but you're a young 33. You're not someone who's had a ton of time in the octagon like some guys who might be your age. How long do you want to keep fighting? We just saw in the Super Bowl, Tom Brady's 43. Daniel Cormier fought to about 40-something years old. How long do you want to do this?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's based on how my body is able to receive and deal with everything. Because to prepare for these fights is a lot. It takes a lot out of me, especially being me in the way that I prepare. It takes a lot out of you. And so that's going to determine the longevity that I have in the sport, is how healthy I'm able to stay and how long I want to continue to do it. Because over time, there's a reason people retire. Over time, the hits and the punches, they feel okay. You can deal with them. But over time, there's just that day that you wake up and say, I don't really feel like getting hit today. And so until I think we cross that path, I think I should be all right.
He is the UFC welterweight champion of the world, defending his title at UFC 258 versus Gilbert Burns on ESPN Plus. Pay-per-view is where you can watch it. And as all guests, he appeared right here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Kamaru, it's been incredible watching your ascent, become a champion, and we look forward to seeing you defend that belt on Saturday night.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Great stuff from Kamaru Usman, the welterweight champion of the world. I'll give you my full rundown of UFC thoughts and picks coming up next, and we will get back to your comments about Carson Wentz, the Eagles, and more here on 97.3 ESPN. Before we do that, I do want to just say real quick two things. One, Kamaru is fighting probably the most difficult fight of his life, which is someone who knows him intimately. And I explained this to Hunter Brody yesterday. Imagine if, for example, in hockey, Brody's played hockey at the high levels. Let's say you had a goaltender that you played with for years, and you know each other from practicing, iron sharpened iron, you made each other better, and then down the road, that guy's no longer on your team, and now you're playing him in the Stanley Cup final. Or it's similar to if you have a pitcher and you're a catcher, and you guys worked together for maybe 5-6 years, and you had success, and that guy had success. But then 2 years later, you're in the World Series, and you're at bat in the 9th inning, in the Game 7, and that guy's on the mound, and he's still throwing smoke. What are you going to do? That's what Burns versus Usman is tonight. This is more than just a title fight. You're going to find out who is made of what tonight. And that's what excites me the most about this fight card tonight. This is about two guys who know each other better than anybody else on earth. And they're going into this fight, and they're saying, I know how to beat you. And the other person is saying, no, I know how to beat you. And we're going to find out for sure who the real better fighter is. Because no matter what happens the rest of their careers, this is the biggest fight of both of their lives. The stakes are the highest, too, because the belt is on the line.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Now, Sports Bash Saturday. Here's Josh Hennig.
And a happy Saturday morning. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill. Sports Bash Saturday, the best of Saturday morning. I do drink my coffee, but I like it black with some sugar. So I'm not like Mike Gill. I'm a little different with the coffee, but we still have the one and only, the big man on campus, the host of the Big Man on Basketball podcast, Jeff Nadu, for another Saturday morning. Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm great, Josh. How are you?
Doing pretty good. And listen, I feel like that this is the perfect time for people. They haven't subscribed already. They haven't hit that ad. They haven't hit the download, whatever it is they do on their platform. Big Man on Basketball, because basketball season is in full swing. We're finally done with football. And other with football, I love football, but it just feels like now is time for everybody to get into basketball. And this is your time of year, my friend.
Yeah, this is kind of how it works, Josh. I mean, the NFL ends, Super Bowl ends, and it's basketball until, this year, May, late May, maybe even in June. I kind of forget kind of when the NBA season ends. But, yeah, up until April, you have the NCAA tournament, obviously, and all the conference tournaments and kind of the nitty-gritty, the bubble stuff, the feast week, all that kind of – or the rivalry week, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, this is where a lot of people become basketball fans. And, we've been doing it for a while, people like me. I've been doing it since, back in the summer. But, yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm raring and ready to go. So, yeah, a lot to do, a lot to get into.
Yeah, let's get to some of these teams here, because this is the time of year people to start getting educated about who exactly is out there in college basketball. And I want to start here locally in our area with Villanova, because they're a trendy team here in this area of the country. A lot of people love their two runs. And I've been told, I don't know if this is true or not, but some experts out there are trying to say that this is a year that anybody can win the tournament. So what is your perspective on Villanova right now, 12-2?
Yeah, you talk to certain people, they're the third best team in America. And look, there's kind of the bar set that it's Gonzaga, Baylor, and everybody else, which you're not going to have an argument from me. They're both on different wavelengths. But Villanova is, the de facto third best team. Now, Michigan hasn't played in a while. They've been on a pause. But, Villanova's been largely not talked about. They had a month-long break right around Christmas where they didn't play from December 23rd to January 19th. And they've kind of been playing ever since. They did have one kind of a bad loss, I guess you could say, St. John's is basically a bubble team at this point, maybe out of the field at this point. So yeah, that's not a great win, or sorry, that's not a great loss. But they're just kind of rolling through like they normally do. They're very dependent on the 3-point shot. They've got a great offense, and defensively they have some question marks. But they're led by Moore and Gillespie. They have a good group of bigs. They're not a real deep team, but this starting five is as good a team as you'll find. I think they're a 2 seed right now with kind of the ability to move up, and depending on what they do in the Big East tournament, could be a 1 seed because, Josh, the thing this year that's been pretty obvious that outside of Villanova or outside of Baylor and Gonzaga, no team really wants to assume that 3rd spot. Every time a team looks like they're that 3rd best team, they lose to St. John's, or they lose to Butler, or they lose to a team they shouldn't lose to. So, Villanova has plenty to prove still. I think when it's all said and done, they'll be right there.
Now, in the past, Villanova usually has had a player or two that they can kind of latch their hat onto in the past. Is Jeremiah Robinson Earl, can he be that kind of guy to carry a team deep in a 20 run?
Yeah, him and Gillespie are definitely those 2 guys. I mean, Robinson Earl was a kid that I thought would maybe come out. He didn't last year. He stayed back, and he's had a great season. Really lately, he's been terrific. The last 4 games, he's been very solid. But yeah, he's going to be a guy they're going to lean on. He does a lot of things well. He's not a guy that's really going to he can't really guard, I think, opposing bigs. Like against a guy like Mcclung at Seton Hall, I think he'd have trouble with. But, he's kind of that 4 that can score, and he's a good rebounder, and he's going to kind of dominate you. But I think on the defensive end, he's a little outmatched. But, yeah, to take over a team, yeah, for sure.
You mentioned Seton Hall. Let's get into them a little bit because they're a team that you've talked about on the Big Man on Basketball pod, and they're one of those teams that you kind of look at and, there's kind of that, if you're an older guy, you remember their big runs back in the day, but maybe someone you're younger, you look at them like, who the heck is Seton Hall? So where does Seton Hall line up in the big scheme of things for you right now?
Yeah, they're a team that I don't ever want to let go of. I've had a real, not obsession, but a real interest in this team for a number of years. A couple of years ago, they had a really good team. They had a kid, Kadeem Carrington, and they had a kid, Angel Delgado, just a terrific team. But this year, I'm really high on them. I know they have some losses. They're 11-8, and they're not going to blow a lot of people away. But when you further look at the losses, I mean, they were to all good teams, and they're eventually, Josh, going to have to start beating good teams when it matters most. They're going to have to start beating a Villanova. They're going to have to start beating a Creighton. But I think they have a lot of things that are going to be useful when it matters most. They have a really good group of guards. They're really good defensively. And I mentioned Mcclung, the kid from Georgia. He is going to be, I'm going to tell you right now, Josh, when June and July comes around, when the draft happens, he is going to be a player that is going to be a high interest pick. I think he is going to be a really good player at the next level. It's got really good kind of skills and a skill set. But they're a team that I'm interested in. And I'll tell you another thing. From a spread standpoint, they have been terrific recently. You look at over the last 6 games, they've covered 4-6 overall. I love teams that can shoot free throws. They do it one of the highest rates in the country, and they're the 3rd biggest team in America. So they are an impending team. They're hard to score against because they're so long and lengthy. I like Seton Hall. They have some value to me in the long futures market.
Jeff Nadu, Big Man on Basketball, is the podcast, joining us for a Saturday morning cup of coffee, getting us some basketball right here on the Best of the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. With all that being said, is Seton Hall the biggest threat to Nova in the Big East, or are one of those other teams a bigger threat?
Well, look, I think Seton Hall is a huge threat. I think Creighton is a threat. I also think UConn is a threat. And this is a team that every year, Josh, I do a conference tournament preview for every conference, 1 to 31 this year. We don't have any Ivy League, but I will do every preview, and I will definitely highlight UConn as a team that I think could win the Big East. Right now, they're not going to seem like it because they've lost 4 of 5, but it's important to understand they have been without their All-American James Bouknight. He's only played 6 games this season. He's missed the last, I think, 8 games with an injury. The kid out of Brooklyn, he is terrific. I mean, this is a guy that dropped 40 earlier this year against Creighton. The kid's a baller. He's as important to a team as you'll find. When he comes back, this team is going to be really hard to beat. So they're a team that I have jotted down. I'm going to feverishly watch him and see when he comes back. I'm going to give him a game or two to get his legs back. But when the conference tournament comes around, I expect Bunai to be back. He makes them an instant player in the Big East.
Let's keep educating the people who may have missed the majority of the college basketball season. Let's stick in our area. Rutgers, they're an interesting story. They were 25th in the country coming into this week. They're a team that's got some interesting players. They've had some interesting wins. They had a tough losing streak there for a couple games. What is your perspective on Rutgers right now?
Yeah, they don't do a whole hell of a lot for me, frankly. I think what Pikel's done there is impressive. I mean, this is a team that at one point had Eddie Jordan as their head coach. So, I think he's done. And look, in that athletic program, they've had a real renaissance over the last year to 3 years. But when it comes down to brass tacks on a basketball court, I've just watched this team time and time again struggle to make shots. And there's games where they look really solid offensively, and you got to give them credit. But, defensively, I feel like this year they've just been good. They haven't been great. And they'll beat up on the likes of Indiana and Minnesota and Michigan State. But when it really comes down to it, I don't know that they might win a game or two in the Big Ten tournament, but I don't think they have what it takes to beat Illinois or Iowa or Ohio State when it matters most. And I know people will point to the 3-point win they had against Illinois, but that was a wild game. Could have went either way. I think they're just an average team. I'd be surprised if they won more than a game in the NCAA tournament. They're just blah to me. They don't have enough athletes. They get into foul trouble a lot. They're very handsy. They can't keep their hands off people when guarding. A lot of that stuff, Josh, I don't like. I want a team that has good basketball IQ. They don't strike me as a team that have that. They're also very poor from the free throw line. We're the worst teams in the country. And look, the truth of the matter is if you cannot make free throws, you will not win. They also go through these stretches where they can't shoot the ball. So, yeah, I'm not real high on them.
You mentioned Illinois. That's one of the teams I've actually gotten to see in a good amount this year. I feel like every time I flip on the TV to go see a college basketball game, I see Dosunmu and that fun team running around out there. To me, and this is just my perspective. I've seen them. I've seen Ohio State. I've seen Iowa. Of those three teams, I have to admit, I actually enjoy watching Illinois the most of those three Big Ten teams.
It's funny because I couldn't agree with you more. I think at times they're electric to watch. I think Dosunmu is a star. But then there's times where they're just maddening to watch. Like Kofi Cockburn, who, he's just a young kid that, he still has a lot of growing to do. He's a terrific player when he really plays. But when he just gives like minimal effort, he can be really irritating. I'll tell you, who he reminds me of a lot? That guy in Philadelphia right now for the Philadelphia 76ers. He has the immense talent and he can dominate games. And when he's on, he's as good a player in the country as you'll find, as is Embiid. But we've seen to him in Philadelphia, there are times where he's a maddening player to deal with. And Cockburn will either grow and mature or he won't. He'll just be a good player. But yes, Illinois is one of those polarizing teams you'll find because I think when they're on, they're as good as anyone in the country, and they really could win it all. But my pause with them comes with they just have a lot of kids that are like Cockburn. They have kids that are either turnover prone or they can't make shots in big games. They're young. But when they're on, if they can get 4 or 5 games in the NCAA tournament where they're buttoned on, they can win it all. But I've just seen a lot of games where they've wilted, and they need more than Dosunmu and Cockburn to win. They need Curbelo, the freshman, to step up. They need Adam Miller to make shots. He's gone kind of cold for most of the season. So I need them to be consecutive, and they haven't been that. So that's my concern with them. But they have the talent to win it all. I think they could beat Gonzaga. I think they could beat Baylor, but they need everyone to be on, and I haven't seen that enough.
Don't worry, we'll get to the Sixers in just a bit as well. Big Man on Basketball is the podcast. He is Jeff Nadu, Big Man on Campus, Barstool Sports, joining us here on a Saturday morning with your cup of coffee, getting you some basketball knowledge here on 97.3 ESPN. Let's jump over to the ACC. Duke, not ranked, North Carolina, not ranked, and their kids are not smart. So you only school out there in the top 25 that I think most people would think is a legitimate team is what, Florida State at this point?
Well, I would go Virginia. As far as, I guess, teams that I would want to back, Virginia is a very smart basketball team. They're high basketball IQ. That's something that Coach Tony Bennett just instills in them. If you know anything about Tony's father, Dick Bennett, he was a terrific coach. He actually instituted an offense that not many teams use, but Virginia uses it. It's called the blocker mover offense. It's really dependent on just taking a ton of time and just finding open shots. That's what it is. And it's a lot of screens and moving around. And, they've excelled at that. This year, though, and a lot of people have said over the years, I don't want to watch that offense because it sucks. It's slow. It's boring. Not this year. This is one of the most efficient teams in the country. And what I love about Virginia is they're always going to be elite defensively. They're always a top 20 defensive team. So when you start getting all that, I'm interested. I think this team is very bettable long term. I think when it all said and done, a lot of people are going to look at Virginia and say, why did I not remember Virginia? They do a lot of things well. So they're a team that, if I'm picking an ACC team, Florida State I have no interest in. They have no point guard. Okay, they have no one to handle the basketball, Josh. They're a huge team, but they have no point guard. And that's concerning long term. So for me, it's all about Virginia. And that's all we really need to say about the ACC.
I did want to ask you also, though, about Virginia Tech, the other Virginia team, because there's a guy from South Jersey playing for them, Justin Mutz. He's had a couple nice games this year. I know a lot of people in this area, they're interested in Virginia Tech because of Mutz. He was over at the prep here in South Jersey. So what are the long-term projection for you for Va Tech?
Yeah, Justin Mutz is an interesting kid. I mean, he started his career at High Point for Tubby Smith, and he went to Delaware, played under Martin Inglesby, and now he's over at Virginia Tech. So it's been a long, interesting basketball career for him in college. But yeah, he's played really well lately too. I mean, he had a big game the other night against Miami. But, they're interesting too, I think, because when Mike Young, their coach, he was at Wofford before Virginia Tech. And one thing I always remember about those teams at Wofford is they shoot a ton of threes. And his whole adage is threes are worth more than twos. And that has been no different at Virginia Tech. You look at nationally, they shoot a ton of threes. They're very reliant on the three-point shot to score. But those offenses, they might be good for one game, Josh, but long term, they're just not real sustainable. You have to really get hot for days on end. And in the NCAA tournament, it's just not easy to do. And that's why you would see like a Wofford beat like a Seton Hall or a team like that, but then fall flat in their face the next game. You have to be more well-rounded. I'm not quite sure that Virginia Tech is that, but they have a kid to go along with Mutz, a kid, Kiva Luma, who actually came over from Wofford with Mike Young. He's a big that's interesting. They've got some kids that can shoot, but they're not a long-term proposition because I don't believe in teams that can just shoot threes.
Let's jump over to the Big 12 before we move on to the NBA, Jeff. Again, Big Man on Basketball is the podcast for all your college basketball and some NBA information as well. Jeff Nadu joins us every Saturday morning. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on Sports Bash Best of Saturday. We all know about Baylor. Baylor, number 2 team in the country. Everyone talks about them. But tell me about Texas Tech, Jeff.
Yeah, a typical Red Raider team. Very good defensively, very motivated, really high energy on that end. They really expel what their coach expels. And I've been on record as saying I think Beard is a top 2 coach in the country. I really believe that. I think he is about as good a coach as you'll find. He gets the best out of kids. It is very difficult, Josh, to get a kid that's 19, 20, even 18 and say, if you come to this university, you are going to play defense. If you don't play defense, you're not going to play at this university. It's hard to get kids to love to play defense. Kids want to be Steph Curry and dunk and shoot threes and do all that kind of stuff. He gets his kids to believe. He gets the right kind of kids. But this year's interesting because he has a kid in Mcclung who he's never had before. Mcclung, to anyone that doesn't know, is a kid that we've all seen when we were kids, the kid that he can go play in any neighborhood in a city. He could play with, the prep school kids. He can go down and play with the kids in the city. He can play anywhere. And he has an electric game. He's not afraid to shoot the basketball. He's not afraid to have the ball in his hands at the end of the game. And that is so important for a team. I thought it was just an incredible transfer that they were able to grab. They have a great mix of veteran and youth. They're deep. They're experienced. And, they have Mcclung. And defensively, they're very good. So I like them. I don't love them. I like them. I think they're worth a look in the futures market because Beard is just that good. There are some other teams in that conference that I like as well, but Texas Tech's always interesting. They're a lot like Virginia to me. They're always there.
Now, you mentioned other teams in that conference. The other team I want to hit on with you is Bob Huggins' team, WVU. They're usually known for their defense. They took out Texas Tech with a win a couple days ago as well. What's your perspective on them? Because they're a team that I think a lot of people had a lot of questions about coming into the year.
Yeah, they've just shot the lights out, Josh, in Big 12 play. I mean, on the season in the Big 12 in conference play, they're shooting 43% from three, which is really a way different way of scoring than they're known for. If you know anything about Huggins, it's press on defense. It's a lot of ugly half-court basketball, and they're lucky they've made threes because their two-point offense has been, frankly, hard to watch. They lost one of their bigs, Oscar Shibwe, who had, I guess, a bit of a beef with Huggins. He transferred out of the program, and that kind of hurt my thought on them a little bit. I still think they're a team to keep an eye on, though. If they can kind of get a little bit more balanced, I have some interest, but they're a big basketball team. They're hulking. They're great rebounders. They have the number one block percentage in the conference. So they're an impending team to deal with. If they could just get a little bit more well-rounded, they might be the second best team in this conference. One team that I'll throw out there quickly as well, Texas. Okay, because on the court, Texas is really good. Okay, they have bigs that are really tough to deal with. Kid like Greg Brown, he's, I think, a top 15 pick. He's going to take a lot of money at the next level. They have really good guard play. They're good defensively. They do a lot of good things on offense. The issue I have with Texas is the guy on the sideline, Shaka Smart. Not a guy. If Chris Beard were the coach of this team, I think they could be a favorite to win it all. Sadly, they have Shaka Smart. And look, I don't know Shaka personally. I just don't think he's a great basketball coach. And I think that's an issue for me. Coaching is very important in college basketball, and I just don't think he's a great coach. They're going to go as far as he allows them to go.
For all this insight and more, make sure you check out the Big Man on Basketball podcast, even deeper look into college basketball. And listen, I get all my information from you, Jeff. So the only thing I know about college basketball is from listening to the podcast. If you don't mention the podcast, I don't know squat, okay?
Well, that's nice to hear, Josh. And I want to make that very clear. I give out gambling picks. I've been betting for, I don't know, going on 20 years now. I've been gambling since I was a kid. But one thing I will always tell you, you will always get high-level information from me. I will bring on guests that will give you high quality information. And I'm happy to hear that you enjoy the show, and I hope people do as well. Go check me out.
Yeah, Big Man on Basketball is the podcast. You mentioned gambling information. I did have a general gambling question for you. And it's not about a specific bet or anything, because I know some people, they could tweet at you if they want to, try to harass you about that. But my general question is, I always try to explain to people, because my perspective on sports betting is, if there's no value there, what is the point of making the bet? I feel like so many people are like, I got picks. And I'm like, I don't care about your picks. I care about, is there any value in this bet? Like, I've seen so many times people say, well, here's my pick. And I'm like, well, I got to throw like $150, $200 on that to get any value back.
How'd you
useless.
Get there, right?
Yeah, I just want to know your perspective on that.
No, I think, nowadays, I used to try to argue about this, and I used to try to make what I do matter, because I do think that what I do is important. I think there are a lot of people that don't have the time I do to do what I do. I almost feel bad if I would just throw a pick out and not tell you why, or if I'm giving you a bad number. There are so many people and kids that they want to so badly try to get and fit in with this that they'll literally sell their soul and be a bad gambler to do so. So, I can't bring myself. So if I have an NBA game that I like the number at 6.5, and I wake up and I didn't move on it. It's now 4.5, and I'm a dog. I'm not betting it at 4.5. Like, I'm just not going to bet it. Like, there's so many people that just bet things just to do it. Like, all the time I hear, like, I just want late night action on this game, or I don't really have a feeling on the game, but I'm just going to bet it because I like the team, or like, it's your money. Like, you work hard for your money. Like, you know, unless you're just like this trust fund kid that just has money he can throw away, you know, it's important. And I feel like putting some time into that is important. And this is what I love to do. It's almost like anything. You know, if you're not going to just jump into it and just waste your time and not put time into it, value is important. And the problem that the word value means now for gamblers is when they do things like me or they go on video, they use the word value like a crutch. It's a lazy way to handicap. Oh, I have value. Listen, value is not you had 300 to 1 in the future and now it's 100 to 1 and you bet it at 100 to 1. You didn't get the best price. That's not value. Value is a made up word for a lot of these people. They have no idea what it even means. It's just it's a fancy way of talking, they feel like, and they don't really have value. So yeah, you do your due diligence. If you're going to gamble, take some time and learn. You know, don't just jump in and a guy tells you to bet, you know, Loyola Chicago tomorrow. Well, why? Like, why do you like them? Tell me why. That's my thing on Twitter. I make a point, someone makes a counterpoint. Okay, tell me why.
Right.
Tell me why you think that. And normally they don't respond. So
nah, of course, because they hide behind the keyboard that's Twitter. So by the way, that's at Jeff Nadu on Twitter. If you want a little honesty over there. Jeff, before I let you go, I said we would get to the Sixers. Listen, that out-of-bounds play on Thursday night was probably one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. I've been told for months how much of a great offensive mind Dave Yeager is and Doc Rivers this and that. And then I see the Sixers go out there, and I feel like a high school team would have executed a better inbounds play. But you know what? Listen, I'm not hating on the Sixers. They're having a good year. But I think it's fair to say, Jeff, that you know, for every time you think this team is taking a step forward, they're also taking a step back.
Yeah, you know, and this has kind of been the continued point that I'm going to make about them. I think they've had a good year. You're very correct. You're really correct with that. But, you know, I think it's just some things that they've done that are irritating, like that play. You know, like you just can't make that pass. I didn't really understand. Danny Green was open. I know he was out towards half court, but there was still, at least you would have got a shot up. What you did gave you virtually very little opportunity to get a shot up. And look, say what you want about Robert Covington. The guy's an elite defender. I mean, he just is. I mean, and it made it even worse that he was right in that play, because the Sixers have had a way of over the years just being very, you know, grade school like at finding talent and, you know, leaving and letting talent go early. And look, I wasn't the biggest Robert Covington fan, but you know, they always say you don't really know what you have until it's gone. And when you see some of these guys move on and you say, wow, you know, it's too bad that they weren't able to just scout talent and understand that he could be on this team and he could really help this team, especially when they want to win. I just look at them and I don't see a team that when it comes down to brass tacks, look, when the Heat are fully healthy, the Sixers aren't going to beat them. I mean, we're getting crazy over 25 games. You know, they're still making mistakes. I mean, remember that Lakers snafu where they almost blew a lead with a minute and a half to go, and they almost lost the game, and they needed like a crazy shot at the end of the game to rescue. We also go back to one of those Piston games a couple of weeks ago where you have a guy in Ben Simmons who, if he can shoot the basketball, they have a way better look and could win the game. Instead, he dishes it off to Maxey, who has this like off-balance fadeaway three, and it doesn't even come close. Ben Simmons continues to hinder the development of this team long term. Okay, I'm going to keep saying it. I know he had a good game last night, and I know he gives you occasional flashes, but he continues to hold this team back. Okay, I don't know how long or how many games they need to before they see that. They're not going to change it. It's been pretty clear of that, but you know, you just can't. I don't think you can be what you want to be with him here. I just don't.
He's Jeff Nadu at Jeff Nadu on Twitter. Big man on campus to Barstool Sports. And, of course, don't forget to subscribe and download the Big Man on Basketball podcast. joins us every Saturday morning right here with your cup of coffee, with your basketball information here on 97.3 ESPN. Jeff, you'll be talking to Mike on Tuesday. I appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, great stuff, Josh. Really like these kind of calls, and I appreciate you having me on. Have a great weekend. Appreciate it.